What is a revocable living trust? A revocable living trust is a contract. And just like any other contract, the document has provisions that outline an agreement among the parties who are named in the document. A trust has three key players: a grantor or settlor, that's the person who's creating the trust. The trustee is the person that is controlling the trust. And the beneficiary, which is the person or multiple people who receive the benefit from the trust assets. Very often, when someone creates a revocable living trust, during their lifetime, they serve all three roles. They are the grantor, they are the trustee, and very often, not always, but in most cases, they are the sole beneficiary of the trust. This gives them complete control over the trust. They can modify the terms, they can add assets or remove assets from the trust, and if they choose, they can revoke the trust or terminate it completely and retitle any assets that were put into the trust back into their individual name. One of the most important questions that people ask is, why would you set up a revocable living trust? If you're following along so far, it seems kind of strange, right? I can take assets that I own in my individual name. I can set up this legal document that names myself as the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. I move assets over into this legal construct, and for what? And it's a great question. The reason that most people set up a revocable living trust is to avoid the probate process. If you move assets into the name of a trust, as long as it's funded and set up properly, those assets will pass outside of the probate process. And this is the rationale that most people use for setting up a revocable living trust. I want to pause for a moment because what I've outlined so far does not paint a complete picture. In states like Pennsylvania, where I practice, revocable living trusts are not a common or standard estate planning tool. And the reason is because the probate process in Pennsylvania is relatively straightforward and cost-effective. And the process of trust administration follows many of the same rules as the probate process. So most estate planning attorneys in Pennsylvania are not utilizing revocable living trusts for their clients, or their clients aren't utilizing these tools just for the purpose of avoiding probate. There may be other reasons why they can be useful, but it's not a standard estate planning tool. In other states, it is, very much so. It's a tool that most people have in their estate plan, and the reasons for that primarily are the benefit of passing outside of probate or avoiding the probate process is much larger than it is in states like Pennsylvania. Another common reason that people like the idea of a revocable living trust is because you can address within the document what would happen in the event of incapacity. Now, we've talked previously about powers of attorney, and powers of attorney are set up for the same reason. But it's interesting to note that a trust can often accomplish similar goals. So at least to the extent that the assets were titled into the name of the trust, what you would do is name a successor trustee. If I set up the trust and at the beginning, during my lifetime, as long as I am of sound mind, I am the settlor, the grantor, I am the trustee, and I am the beneficiary. I can put provisions in the revocable living trust document that name a successor trustee in the event that I would become incapacitated. And what that does is it allows that successor trustee to step in and manage the assets in the trust on my behalf. The last topic that I'd like to address in this episode is what revocable living trusts do not do. Number one, they do not provide any creditor protection. What that means is that any assets that I've moved over into the trust are subject to my individual claims, any creditor claims, judgments that are entered against me, any outstanding bills that I'm not paying. If someone files a lawsuit, they can go after the assets that I've moved into the trust. So there is no creditor protection. There's no asset protection qualities of a revocable living trust. The second, and probably the most common misconception, is that a revocable living trust does not avoid inheritance tax or estate tax. There are no tax benefits of a revocable living trust. There's no income tax benefits. There's no estate tax benefits. There are no inheritance tax benefits. This is a common misconception. People think that if you take an asset and you convert it into a non-probate asset, something that passes outside of the will, something that passes outside of probate, that somehow you avoid the tax that may be associated with that asset if it were to pass through your estate. This is not true. Any assets that move into a revocable living trust are subject to income tax if they generate income during your lifetime. And at death, they are subject in Pennsylvania to Pennsylvania inheritance tax, and they are subject to federal estate tax. I'd like to thank you for joining me in this video. I hope that this information was helpful, and I hope that you enjoy the content. If you do, let me know. And I hope that you will join me in the next video.